My name is Marisela Quaid, 71 years old. The morning it happened, I stood in my bedroom with a pale pink dress draped across my bed like a hope I could touch. The fabric wasn't expensive, $200 on sale, but I'd picked it the way a woman picks a prayer, carefully, with trembling hands. The shoes waited beside it, low heels, in a color called champagne, which felt like optimism made leather. On the dresser, an envelope with crisp bills, $1,000 I'd set aside as a gift for my only son, Max, and his bride, Lena. I imagined pinning a note to it, something corny like, "For the start of your home," and hearing them laugh and tell me I was sweet. I imagined being asked to hold a bouquet for a second, being ushered into photos, someone saying, "No, no, get one of Max with his mom." I had cleaned the house as if joy were a guest who could be impressed by polished wood. My sister Diana in Chicago had been told the time and asked if she might fly in, and when she said she couldn't, I told her not to worry. I'd send photos. I'd send everything. For weeks I'd rehearsed what to say to Lena if she looked nervous. "You're family now. I am in your corner for life." I set out glasses in the kitchen just in case they wanted to stop by after toasts and cake. Small things. Mother things. When I called to confirm the date, I heard my own voice wobble in the cheerful part. "So, Saturday the 12th, right? What time should I arrive?" Lena didn't hesitate. She looked me straight in the face, curled a smile that had too many teeth, and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." I felt the sentence before I understood it. It went into my bones first, like cold poured down a staircase. Words can be knives, but these were liquid nitrogen. No blood, just a flash freezing that made everything inside me brittle. "Special people," she said, as if I were a practical category error. A clerk might stamp me with that phrase. Not special, do not admit. Max was there, standing a step behind her, eyes skittering away as if the floorboards were fascinating. "Mom," he said, "it was an intimate thing, very small. Just us and the witnesses. A lie can be gentle or blunt. This one tried to be a cushion, but I'd already seen the truth the night before, scrolling on my phone while ironing the dress. Lena's parents were posing beside the bride and groom, beaming. Her siblings were raising glasses, the light catching their rings in joy. The dress, white, mermaid cut, lace sleeves, looked suspiciously like the one I'd slid cash to help her afford. I had given her 8 $100 bills last month when she said she needed personal expenses. I recognized the earrings, too. I had driven her to the boutique that day. I saw all of it, everything I wasn't supposed to see. Modern life makes sure there is always a camera to confirm your humiliation. "I see," I said, which meant I did not see how a mother becomes less special than a neighbor with a good bottle of wine. I was standing in my own living room, phone in hand like a dumb, shiny brick, while the sofa I'd bought for their apartment supported Lena's careful posture when she visited. Always crossing her legs, always placing her phone screen down, always calling me by my first name like it was polite when it was really distance. The pink dress lay mute in the next room. The envelope with the $1,000 might as well have been a ransom note I'd written to myself. Years of being the bridge they walked across suddenly sparked and smoked beneath my feet. "You didn't miss anything," Lena added, almost kind. "It was nice and quick." "Nice," I repeated, because sometimes you speak a word to test if it can survive being said twice. 3 years of $500 rent transfers like clockwork. 3 years of, "Could you grab us groceries?" when their fridge had the hollow echo of an empty jar. 3 years of, "We'll pay you back when we're stable," a promise as weightless as breath on a cold window. I had told myself you do this for your child because who else will? I had told myself I was investing in their future. I had told myself love is supposed to cost something. And now I stood there realizing I'd been paying dues to a club where my membership card was always about to be revoked. Max cleared his throat and looked at a spot to my left. "Mom, it was last minute. We just wanted special people," I finished softly, because I can be mean when cornered. It comes out like velvet, which frightens people more. He winced. "I'm sure we'll do a little something later, just us," he tried, and the words "just us" landed like a Band-Aid on a knife wound. I could hear my pulse. It sounded like footsteps in an empty hallway. Somewhere inside, a door that had been cracked for years slid half an inch more closed. Not a slam, nothing dramatic. Just a quiet click, the kind you only notice when you try to open it again and find you can't. "Oh," I said, and smiled the sort of smile that happens when your face is on autopilot and your soul has excused itself. "Tell your parents congratulations," I added to Lena, before remembering I wasn't supposed to have parents in common with her. She blinked, then nodded, a polite triumph twitching at the corner of her mouth. After they left, after their cologne and expensive soap smell dissolved in my entryway, I sat at the edge of my bed, the dress staring back at me like a choice. I pressed my palms to my knees the way you do in church when the prayer runs long. The house made those small, settling sounds older homes make, as if something in the walls knew and disapproved. I took the envelope, slid it under the sweater drawer, and told myself I'd use the money to replace the dryer hose that always shook. The lie sat cold next to the cash. That night I scrolled again, as if knowledge might change this version of reality. The photos had multiplied because joy loves witnesses. There were boomerangs of champagne fizz, cake cutting, a slow dance. Lena's sister had captioned one. "Only the best people in the room tonight." The pettiness of that line lodged under my nail. I mocked the phrasing aloud, "the best people," and my voice sounded like someone I'd used to be, back before caution made every sentence a pre-apology. Sleep didn't arrive so much as conk me on the head with a pillow. At 3 a.m., I woke to the refrigerator humming like an old friend trying too hard. In the dark kitchen, I poured water, cold tap burning down my throat. My reflection in the window looked like an honest stranger. Tired eyes, yes, but something else threaded through them. Something mineral and unsentimental. Not hardness exactly, a sediment, a settling of grit. I touched my cheek and caught myself wondering whose funeral I had just attended. In the morning, I folded the pink dress carefully, smoothed its hopeful creases, and rehung it. It made a soft hiss as it slid along the rod. There is a sound chagrin makes when it is silk. A week later, exactly 7 days after the phrase "only special people" had carved a notch in my life, Lena called. Her voice had swapped its satin for paper. "Renate," she began. She always mispronounced my name in that affectionate way that erases you. "The rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. If we don't pay this week, we're out. You forgot to make the transfer." I stood very still, as if sudden movement might scare off the animal of clarity that had crept into the room. In my head, pictures played, the supermarket lines where I'd swiped my card for their groceries, the month I made beans and rice a delicacy, so I could send extra for their unexpected car repair. The sofa she'd sunk into with crossed ankles. My sofa, in my house, purchased when they couldn't afford a decent one, but needed a place for guests. Guests like me, waiting for the privilege of being included. I traced the rim of my mug. The warmth didn't reach my fingers. "Lena," I said, and even I heard the new tone. Measured, almost pleasant, as if I were recommending a wine I didn't drink. "Didn't I warn you?" A pause, generous. "I only help special people." Silence can be generous, too. On her end, it went wide and deep, a canyon after thunder. When she finally found her footing, it was on gravel. "Renate, I don't understand. We're special to you. You're like a second mom to me." It was impressive how easily she could swap registers, from bouncer at the Velvet Rope to penitent orphan on a dime. The same voice she'd use for "could you help with the ring?" and "my skin is a mess, facials are so expensive," and "flights are outrageous, we couldn't possibly visit this year." The voice of intimacy that never required seeing me. "Are we?" I asked gently, the way surgeons ask where it hurts before they cut. Through the window, the neighbor's dog chased a squirrel in messy circles, and I thought, life is always trying to be itself. We're the ones who train it to sit. "Please," she said, and I could hear the words wait. The landlord, the threat, the habit. "We need you." There it was. Not love, need. My mind lifted like a finger noting a difference. One is a hand reaching, the other is a hand taking. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said at last, as calmly as if I were suggesting a left turn at the next light. "After all, you had a wedding full of special people. Perhaps one of them will help." I ended the call and stood in the quiet that followed. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was a hush the world makes when something old dies correctly. In the bathroom mirror, I met my own eyes again and found that sediment had settled into a line. Not a crack. A seam. A place to stitch from. Out on the table, my checkbook waited like a confession I was finally willing to write. I pulled bank statements from the drawer, stacked 3 years of kindness in neat columns, and began to add. Each number landed like a footstep toward a door I had never believed I could walk through. Somewhere in the distance between what I had given and what I had been given back, a decision finished forming. I did not pick up when Max called. I let the phone ring and imagined him watching it the way he watched my face in the living room, out of the corner of his eye, hoping for a yes that required no work. The call ended. 10 minutes later, it began again. Lena this time from another number. I let it play out. Quiet can be a teacher when you've spent your life answering every question before it's asked. That night, I set the pink dress in the back of the closet, not as punishment, not as a monument, but as evidence, not of what they had done to me, but of what I had been willing to do for them. My fingers brushed the fabric one last time, and I heard it, a different sound than the silk hiss, like a match dragged across rough paper. Small, not yet flame, but real. I turned off the light and let the dark keep me company. Somewhere between the bed and sleep, a sentence I had never allowed myself hardened into bone. I will not buy my way into rooms that should have been mine. The next morning, I woke to silence, so thick it felt staged, like the pause in a play when the audience leans forward. My phone, usually my alarm clock of expectation, messages from Max, pleas from Lena, bank alerts, lay still on the nightstand. For the first time in years, it was not a leash. I brewed coffee, the old drip machine coughing and sighing the way it always did, but the smell came to me sharper, less dulled by background worry. I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, papers spread like evidence, the ledger of my generosity. I started with the obvious, $500 a month for 3 years. That alone was $18,000. I wrote the number slowly, letting each zero sting. Then food, about $200 a month, another $7,200. Gifts, birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, at least $3,000. Medical emergencies Lena always dramatized, $800. The car loan, $2,500 never repaid. The air conditioner repair, $600. Furniture, $1,200. I drew a final line and wrote the sum, $33,400. I stared at the number. My late husband's careful savings, my pension, all chipped away by the daily drip of their wants disguised as needs. For 3 years, I had chosen beans and rice while they posted cocktails on social media. For 3 years, I skipped hair appointments while Lena's nails glittered like mirrors. I had trained myself to believe love required financing. And for what? To be told I was not special. The phone finally rang around noon. I let it go once, twice, then I picked it up, not to answer but to look. Max, my son. The boy who used to sleep on my chest during thunderstorms, his little breath syncing with mine, making me feel like I was the entire roof over his world. I set the phone down gently, face down. Let it buzz like an insect. It died out. A text followed. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. Need. Always need. I deleted it without replying. By afternoon, I decided to take a walk. Not to the bank, not to the grocery store for them, not to the pharmacy for Lena's urgent supplements. Just a walk because the air belonged to me too. I put on my coat and stepped outside. The park near my street still had the same cracked path I'd pushed Max's stroller down decades ago. I paused at the swings, empty now, chains rattling in the wind. I remembered his laughter, his sticky hands reaching for me, his voice saying I was the best mom. When had that child become a man who measured my worth by my balance sheet? Or maybe I had trained him wrong. Maybe I had taught him love could be bought, and he'd simply believed me. The thought stung, but it didn't crush. Instead, it made me straighten my back. I could not rewrite the past, but I could stop financing its mistake. When I passed the bank on the corner, I stopped in front of the glass doors. Mr. Clean, the branch manager, noticed me and waved. I'd known him for years. He'd processed every transfer to Max and Lena, his polite eyes watching my account drain like a slow leak. He came out and held the door for me. Mrs. Quaid, he said warmly, what brings you in today? Another transfer? I shook my head. No, quite the opposite. He frowned, surprised. Inside, I sat across from him at the desk, where so many of my sacrifices had been typed into reality. I need to cancel all automatic transfers, I said. Every single one. And I want information about protecting my accounts. I don't want anyone but me to have access. He hesitated. Are you sure, Mrs. Quaid? You've been so consistent for years. Did something happen? What happened is that I finally opened my eyes, I thought. Out loud, I said, yes, I am sure. As he tapped at the keyboard, my phone buzzed again in my purse. Max. Then Lena. As if they could sense, radar-like, that the vein they'd tapped was being closed. I turned the phone off completely. When the paperwork was done, Mr. Clean handed it over. His eyes softened. Forgive me for saying this, but I've watched you be very generous with your family. I just hope you're not being pressured into these changes. His concern, so simple and genuine, hit me harder than anything Max had said in months. A banker who barely knew me cared more for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured, I told him. I'm finally done pressuring myself. Walking out of the bank, I felt strangely light. Not triumphant, not giddy, just light, as though I'd set down a bag I hadn't realized was breaking my spine. The sky seemed taller. The air felt mine. But lightness can be fragile. When I arrived home, 3 cars were parked in front, Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I saw movement inside, shadows where there should have been none. My blood iced. They had keys. I had given them keys in a fit of trust, in a fantasy where they might one day take care of me, as I had taken care of them. I paused at the door. My hand trembled only once before steadying. Enough. No more trembling. I opened the door. Max was on my sofa, head in his hands, the very picture of burden. Lena paced like a caged cat, sharp in her movements. At my dining table, a man in a gray suit was leafing through my personal papers, bank statements, wills, insurance documents I had left neatly stacked. My privacy splayed open like a dissected animal. What is happening here? My voice sounded louder than I intended, but strong. They all looked up, startled, as if I were the intruder in my own home. Marisela, thank God, Lena began, her voice high, syrupy. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher from the law firm. We're concerned about you, about your situation. My situation, I echoed. I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head. His eyes, once full of innocence, were sharp with calculation. Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all transfers. You blocked our access. We don't understand why. We're worried. You've been acting strange. Mr. Fisher stood, extending a hand. Mrs. Quaid, I'm Dr. Fisher, family law attorney. Your children asked me to assess your capacity to manage your finances. I didn't shake his hand. I strode to the table and scooped up my papers. These are private. You have no right to be looking at them without my consent. Mom, Max said in that condescending tone he'd perfected, we're worried you're confused. First you cut us off, then you don't answer calls. At your age. At my age? I snapped. At my age, I've raised a son alone, managed my finances flawlessly, and supported 2 adults who treat me like I'm nothing more than an ATM with feelings. Lena tried to take my hand, her face arranged into gentle concern. Marisela, honey, maybe the loneliness is getting to you. Episodes of confusion are normal. We just want to help. The word confusion tolled in my skull like a warning bell. This wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. They weren't worried about me. They wanted to declare me incompetent, to take control of the very money I had bled to give them. I straightened, spine iron. I am not confused. I am clearer than I've been in years, and you are going to leave my house. Now. Mr. Fisher tried again. Professional voice smooth. Mrs. Quaid, if your family has documented concerning behaviors, the court may intervene. Guardianship is not uncommon. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Concerning behaviors? Like deciding my money belongs to me? Like refusing to finance the lives of 2 grown adults? That's your case? Lena flinched as though I'd slapped her. We never treated you badly. Your family. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was, the naked truth, stripped of its sugar. To them, I was already dead. I pointed at the door. Out. All 3 of you. Get out of my house. Max stood, his face twisting into that same petulant look he wore as a boy denied a toy. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. Rent, car payments, the credit card you co-signed, you can't cut us off overnight. Who says I can't? My voice finally rose, thunderous. For years, I paid rent, not even in my name. I filled fridges in houses where I wasn't welcome. I financed lives that had no place for me, no more. Mr. Fisher calmly slid a folder onto the table. Mrs. Quaid, we've prepared documents. A power of attorney, temporary, of course, so Max and Lena can manage your finances more efficiently. Without opening it, I picked it up and dropped it straight into the trash. The only transition happening here is you three leaving. Lena began to cry, but I saw it clearly now. Tears not of sadness, but of rage restrained. You can't do this, Marisela. We were counting on you. We made plans. Plans built on my money, I cut in. Not on my well-being, not on my company, only my money. And now that I've decided my money belongs to me, suddenly I'm confused? Old? In need of guardianship? Max stepped closer, his voice low. This will end badly for you. You'll be alone. No one to care for you when you really need it. My throat tightened, but the words came out steady. I am already alone, Max. The difference is that now it's by choice, not by your neglect. The silence that followed was thick and final. They shuffled toward the door, wounded pride their only dignity. Lena turned, her face slick with false tears. This isn't over. I shut the door behind them. The lock clicked, and in the echo of that sound I heard it, the silence of freedom. The night after I threw them out of my house, sleep did not arrive gently. It came in jagged pieces, short bursts that collapsed into wakefulness. I lay staring at the ceiling, tracing the fine cracks I'd never noticed before. They looked like a road map, as if the house itself had been carrying a story of fractures all along, waiting for me to read it. When dawn broke, I rose without the heaviness that usually anchored me. My body felt hollow, not weak, but emptied, like a vessel finally poured out. I brewed coffee, black and bitter, and drank it at the kitchen table where so many of their demands had once been negotiated. That morning, the table was only mine. The phone lay face down. I didn't touch it. I wanted to see how long they could live without my voice. By mid-morning, I was ready. I slipped the folder of bank statements and receipts into my bag. Evidence, not of my generosity, but of their dependency. I was done playing provider. It was time to armor myself. At the bank, Mr. Clean greeted me again. His smile was cautious this time, as though he'd heard whispers already. Back so soon, Mrs. Quaid? I need to make sure nothing can be undone, I said firmly. No one but me touches these accounts. He nodded and added extra security checks, passwords only I could know. I watched him type, each keystroke a nail in the coffin of my old life. When he finished, I asked, and what about protection from legal interference? Legal? He repeated, brows knitting. My son brought a lawyer into my home yesterday. They want me declared incompetent. He blinked, stunned. That's serious. His voice softened. Do you have your own attorney? Not yet, I admitted, but I will. Walking out, I felt both stronger and more vulnerable, like a soldier who knows the enemy will strike harder now. That afternoon, I sat in my living room, staring at the sofa where Max had buried his face in his hands. I thought about how many times I'd pictured him sitting there as a boy, homework spread out, asking me how to spell a word. That boy was gone, or maybe buried under debts, and Lena's sharp smile. The doorbell rang, my stomach clenched. Through the window, I saw their car again, and another behind it. My pulse raced. I opened the door with the kind of calm that is all surface, a pond covering a storm. Max stood tall, defiant. Lena clutched papers against her chest. Behind them was Mr. Fisher, the lawyer in gray, his expression polite but predatory. Mom, Max began, voice rehearsed, we need to talk again. No, I said simply. Please, Lena interjected, her tone syrupy. This is just to help you. You've been making irrational choices. We're worried. The lawyer can explain. Fisher cleared his throat, stepping forward. Mrs. Quaid, your children are only looking out for you. They've asked me to prepare documents to ensure your finances are managed responsibly. Power of attorney is common in situations like this. I crossed my arms. And what situation is that exactly? I pay my bills, I cook my meals, I drive my car, I've kept this house running for decades. Where do you see incompetence? Erratic behavior, Fisher replied smoothly, cutting off long-standing financial support without explanation, isolating yourself, installing unnecessary barriers. Barriers? I laughed, sharp and hollow. You mean locks on my own door? Max stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, don't make this harder. Just sign. We'll handle everything. You don't have to stress anymore. There it was, the offer disguised as kindness. What he meant was, you don't have to think anymore. Just give us control. I turned my back to them and walked into the kitchen. The sound of my heels on the floor was louder than my pulse. When I returned, I carried a small trash bin. I set it down between us, took the papers from Lena's hands without looking at them, and dropped them in. The hollow thud of legal documents hitting plastic was more satisfying than I could have imagined. This conversation is over, I said. Lena's mask cracked, her face twisted. You're making a mistake. You can't do this to us. I already have. Mr. Fisher tried once more, his tone condescending. Mrs. Quaid, refusing help can be seen as evidence of confusion. I urge you to reconsider. I met his gaze. Then consider this my clearest statement yet. Get out of my house. The three of them stood frozen, unused to resistance. Finally, Max's jaw tightened. He pointed at me, finger shaking with rage. This will end badly for you. You'll regret it. I stepped closer, so near I could see the faint scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 8 years old, the one I kissed better. My voice dropped low, colder than I knew I could sound. I already regret raising a son who believes his mother is an ATM. That's my only regret. His face flushed. For a moment, something flickered. Shame, maybe, but it vanished under anger. He stormed out, Lena trailing behind him, her heels clicking like curses. Fisher followed, his briefcase swinging. The door closed with a finality that echoed through the house. I locked it, slid the chain across, and leaned against it, chest heaving. My legs trembled, but inside, something fierce had taken root. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because I was planning. I gathered every document I owned. Bank statements, wills, insurance, deeds. I stacked them neatly on the dining table. Each paper felt like both a weapon and a shield. If they wanted a war, they would find me ready. At midnight, I stood in front of the mirror again. The woman who looked back was still tired, still lined with years. But there was steel in her eyes now, the kind of steel that is forged only in betrayal. I see you, I whispered to my reflection. I won't let them erase you. The silence in the house pressed close, but it was no longer oppressive. It was waiting, like an audience before the curtain rises. And I knew. The real battle hadn't even begun. The morning after the confrontation, I awoke with an unusual stillness in my chest. Not peace, not exactly, but a strange steadiness, as though the storm inside me had finally decided to move in one direction instead of tearing me apart. The phone was buzzing before I even set my feet on the floor. I didn't answer. Not when it was Max, not when it was Lena, not when it was an unknown number that I knew, with the instinct of a hunted animal, was them calling from borrowed phones. Instead, I showered, dressed in a blouse I hadn't worn in years, and brushed my hair with the kind of care I used to reserve for weddings, birthdays, occasions that made me feel like a participant in life. That day, I walked into the beauty salon on Main Street. Cynthia, my stylist for over a decade, froze in surprise. Mrs. Quaid, she gasped, hand over her heart. I thought we'd lost you. You haven't been here in, goodness, a year? I forgot I was allowed to be here, I said, and the words landed heavier than I expected. She tutted softly and guided me into her chair. Well, let's make you remember. As the scissors snipped, I listened to her chatter about her children's school, her husband's new job, her dream of opening a second salon. Simple things, real things. None of it was about needing money, or favors, or survival disguised as love. I found myself leaning into her voice as if it were music. When she spun me toward the mirror an hour later, I hardly recognized myself. My hair was neat, vibrant, alive. My nails shone with a pale polish I hadn't indulged in for years. Cynthia stepped back, beaming. Look at you. You look free. I smiled, not because of the hair, but because the word free had finally landed inside me. That night, I walked home lighter than I had in years. My steps felt deliberate, not rushed. I stopped at a bakery and bought myself a slice of cake, something I hadn't done since before Max was married. As I approached my street, I noticed an older woman sitting on my porch steps. She wore a cardigan and clutched a mug between her hands. I hesitated until she looked up, her face gentle but worried. Mrs. Quaid? She asked. Yes? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've never spoken much, but I heard shouting the other day. I just wanted to check if you were all right. Her concern, so unassuming, nearly cracked me. Here was a neighbor who barely knew me, showing more care than my own son. I'm all right, I said, then caught myself. No, I'm not, but I will be. She nodded and rose. If you'd like company, I brought coffee. I surprised myself by opening the door and inviting her in. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her everything. The secret wedding, the phrase special people, the rent money, the lawyer at my dining table. Eleanor listened without interruption, only occasionally placing her hand over mine in silent solidarity. When I finished, she exhaled, eyes glistening. You did the right thing, Marisela. I went through something similar with my daughter. She bled me dry for years, and when I finally cut her off, she called me cruel. But do you know what happened? 6 months later, she apologized. For the first time, we had a real relationship, not based on money, based on love. Her words burrowed into me, soft but firm. Hope stirred faintly. That night, I fell asleep with an unfamiliar sensation. Not joy, not victory, something steadier, the possibility of survival. But survival is never uncontested. The next afternoon, Lena called again, this time with her voice quivering just right, like an actress who had perfected the role of desperate daughter-in-law. Marisela, she said, we made a mistake. About the wedding. We were nervous. We should have included you. Let us make it up to you. How about dinner together? At your house, like old times. The manipulation was so transparent I nearly laughed. How much rent is overdue? I asked flatly. The silence on the other end was long enough to confirm everything. Finally, she admitted, 2 months, $1,000, but that's not why I'm calling. Yes, it is, I said, and ended the call. That evening, Eleanor came by again with a plate of cookies. She told me more about her daughter's tantrums, the threats, the guilt trips, the silence. They all read from the same script, she said. Chapter 1, Make you feel indispensable. Chapter 2, Invent emergencies. Chapter 3, When you resist, question your sanity. I laughed then, a bitter laugh, but it was laughter nonetheless. It was the first time in years I'd shared an evening with someone who wasn't trying to take something from me. But even as Eleanor's stories gave me strength, the shadows lengthened in my mind. Max and Lena weren't finished. They had tasted dependence too long. They wouldn't surrender easily. The war had not yet reached its peak, and I was no longer the woman who would meet it trembling. The quiet between battles is often the most deceptive. The days following Lena's failed performance of desperation were eerily calm. No knocks at the door, no calls from unknown numbers. I almost believed they'd given up. Almost. But predators don't retreat when the prey resists. They adapt. On the fourth morning, I found 3 envelopes shoved through my mail slot. 2 were bills I recognized. The third bore no return address. I slid it open carefully. Inside were photocopies of legal documents. Petition for guardianship. My breath caught. My son and his wife weren't finished. They were escalating. By the time I finished reading the opening paragraphs, my hands were trembling, not from weakness but fury. The language was clinical, detached, designed to erase me. Subject is exhibiting signs of paranoia. Subject has displayed erratic financial behaviors. Subject may no longer be able to live independently. Each word felt like a knife cutting me out of my own life. I needed a lawyer, not the kind they dragged into my living room, but someone who would fight for me. I called Diana, my sister in Chicago. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm but wary. Marisela, it's been ages. It's bad, I admitted. Max and Lena are trying to take my money through the courts. They want to declare me incompetent. Silence, then a sharp inhale. Oh, Marisela. I wish I could say I'm surprised. I saw the way Max looked at you at Christmas 2 years ago, not like a son, like a banker eyeing a vault. Her bluntness was both comforting and crushing. I need a good attorney, I said. She didn't hesitate. Call Weber, Martin Weber. He handled my neighbor's estate when her kids tried something similar. He's sharp, ruthless when he needs to be, and he has a heart. I'll text you his number. That afternoon, I walked into Mr. Weber's office, a modest building lined with oak shelves and the faint smell of ink. He was in his late 50s, his hair silver at the temples, his handshake firm. Mrs. Quaid, he greeted, please sit. Your sister gave me a brief overview. Why don't you tell me everything? For 2 hours, I did. I told him about the wedding, the money, the rent, the sofa, the lawyer in my dining room, the accusations of confusion. He listened intently, his pen scratching notes, his eyes flashing with something between outrage and pity. When I finished, he leaned back. This is elder financial abuse, commoner than you'd think. They want control of your assets, and they're using your age as a weapon. They're my family, I whispered, my only son. Family, he said carefully, is not a license to exploit. We'll document everything, every transfer, every receipt, every gift. We'll build a wall of evidence. In the meantime, you need to secure yourself. Secure myself? Change your locks, install cameras, block their numbers. If they barge in again, call the police. And don't hesitate to live your life visibly. Buy yourself things, go out, show you're independent. It matters in court. When I left his office, I felt both armored and broken. Armor was necessary because the war had truly begun. Broken because it was my own son who had forced me to wear it. The next day, I drove to Summers Hardware, a store I'd visited countless times over the years, always for things Max and Lena needed. This time, it was for me. Mr. Summer, the owner, squinted as I approached the counter. Mrs. Quaid? Haven't seen you in a while. What's the emergency this time? Your son's apartment again? No, I said firmly. This is for my house. I need new locks. The best you've got. His eyebrows rose, but he didn't pry. He fetched a set of heavy-duty locks. These should keep anyone out, even family. His son Ethan, a broad-shouldered man in his 30s, walked in while I was paying. Need an installer? I handle security systems too. Cameras, alarms. I looked at him, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. Yes, install everything. While Ethan scheduled the work, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered this time against my better judgment. Marisela? Lena's voice, honeyed. Please don't hang up. We want to make things right. Let's have a special dinner, just the three of us, at your house, like family. I laughed, a sound that surprised even me, sharp, almost cruel. How much rent is it now? The silence told me everything. Finally, she whispered, 2 months, 1,000. There it is, I said. Not love, not reconciliation, just another bill. Don't say that, she pleaded. We love you. You're important to us. If I'm important, I said slowly, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I never important enough for a call that doesn't ask for money? Her silence this time was different, defeated. Goodbye, Lena, I said and ended the call. That night, I sat in my living room with Eleanor. She'd brought a thermos of tea and a listening ear. I told her about Weber, about the locks, about Lena's pathetic attempt at dinner. Eleanor shook her head. They won't stop. People like that don't know how. But you're finally fighting back. That's the difference. The wind rattled the windows, and I thought of how many times I'd worried about storms outside. Now, the real storm was inside my bloodline. I wrapped my hands around the tea, its warmth steadying me. They think I'm weak, I murmured. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes steady. Then prove them wrong. The following morning, as the locksmith's drill bit into the old locks and Ethan mounted cameras above my doors, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was spending money on myself, for myself, and it felt like liberation. But even as the cameras blinked to life, I knew the real threat wasn't a break-in. The real threat was the courtroom. And Max and Lena were only just beginning their game. The first test of my new defenses came sooner than I expected. 2 mornings after Ethan finished installing the locks and cameras, the doorbell rang. I froze, heart hammering. The monitor by the door flickered to life, showing a neatly dressed young woman holding a folder. Her professional smile was as polished as her black blazer. I opened the door a cautious crack. Yes? Good morning, Mrs. Quaid, she said brightly. I'm Mrs. Schmidt, a social investigator with the Office of Senior Services. We've received reports that you may be in an at-risk situation, and I need to conduct a wellness check. My blood ran cold. I didn't need to ask who had reported me. May I see your ID? I asked, voice tight. She handed it over without hesitation. It looked official, too official to dismiss. May I come in? She asked. I stepped back, spine stiff. Refusing would look worse. She settled at my dining table, the same table where Fisher had spread his papers, as if my home were some public office where my life could be audited. She opened her folder. Mrs. Quaid, our office was informed that you recently cut off all financial support for your family, that you've installed security systems out of paranoia, and that you've been isolating yourself from loved ones. These may be signs of cognitive decline. Every word was a dagger, carefully honed by Lena's tongue. I almost laughed. Lena hadn't just called me unstable, she had weaponized concern. I clasped my hands on the table. Mrs. Schmidt, before I answer any questions, I'd like to call my lawyer. This isn't a legal interrogation, she replied smoothly. It's just a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, there's no problem answering. That phrase, if you have nothing to hide, stabbed me with rage. It was the same logic abusers use when rifling through diaries or opening mail. I stood, pulled out my phone, and called Mr. Weber. I have a social worker here. She says she needs to evaluate me. Can you come? He was at my door in 20 minutes, briefcase in hand, eyes like sharpened steel when he saw the woman at my table. Miss Schmidt, he said crisply after checking her ID, I trust you have a court order to question my client? She faltered. We received reports from family. The same family, Weber cut in, that excluded her from a wedding she helped finance, that entered her home without permission, and that attempted to coerce her into signing a power of attorney. If anyone here needs investigating, it's them. He slid a folder across the table, full of receipts and bank records. Here is documentation of over $33,000 siphoned from my client in 3 years. That is elder financial abuse, not paranoia. Mrs. Schmidt's confident veneer cracked. She turned to me. Do you manage your own finances? I opened my own binder. Here are my current statements, all in order. Taxes, bills, investments, everything up to date. Do you live independently? I gestured around. I cook my meals. I clean my house. I drive my car. You can check the fridge. It's full of groceries I bought myself. Any medications? Vitamins and aspirin when I have a headache. That's it. Mr. Weber added calmly. My client recently underwent a full medical exam. She is physically and cognitively healthy. Mrs. Schmidt's composure softened. She sighed, closing her folder. Based on what I've seen and the documentation provided, I see no reason for further action. I'll close the case. After she left, the silence in the house felt heavy, but not suffocating. Weber remained at the table, his hand on mine. They're desperate, Marisela. Desperate people escalate. This won't be the last move. I nodded, my throat thick. Then let them. I won't bow again. That evening, I called Diana. Her voice carried both fury and weariness when she heard what had happened. They involve social services? For their own mother? They'll stop at nothing, I admitted. Do you see it now? She asked gently. You were never their family in the way you thought. To Max and Lena, you were always money. That's it. Her words tore something in me. Memories flooded. Max at 7, proud of the paper crown he made me for Mother's Day. Max at 13, crying into my arms after his first heartbreak. Max at 22, grinning when I bought him his first car. Had all of that been prelude to this betrayal? Or had I twisted myself into believing those moments meant more than they did? That night, I sat in my chair and wept. Not for the money, not even for the humiliation, but for the son I realized I no longer had. He was gone, hollowed out by greed. What remained was a stranger with my boy's face. But grief soon hardened into something else. Resolve. I whispered to myself as though vowing it to the walls. They want a war? Then I'll give them one. 3 weeks later, the letter came in a thick, cream-colored envelope that looked far too elegant for what it carried. Notice of hearing. Petition for guardianship. I read it once, twice, 3 times. My own son's name, alongside Lena's, stamped across the top as petitioners. They were asking the court to strip me of my rights, to put my finances, and by extension my freedom, into their hands. For a long moment, I simply sat at the dining table, staring at the paper, the same table where I'd once calculated pennies to cover their rent, the same table where I'd celebrated Max's high school graduation with a cake I couldn't really afford. Now it had become my war desk. When Weber came over that evening, I slid the envelope across to him. He skimmed it, his jaw tightening. They're moving fast. The hearing is in a month. That gives us time, but not much. What evidence could they possibly have? I asked, my voice shaking. He adjusted his glasses. Fabricated, most likely. They'll bring witnesses, neighbors, maybe even professionals willing to give statements. It happens more often than you'd like to know. And he was right. Within days, I heard the rumors. Mr. Davis, the sour neighbor across the street, was telling anyone who'd listen that I was acting strange, installing cameras, yelling at family in the yard, letting strangers come and go. Strangers, of course, meaning Eleanor and the women from her garden club who had become my unexpected lifeline. Then there was Mr. Green, my pharmacist, who sheepishly admitted to me one afternoon that he'd signed a statement Lena shoved under his nose. I thought it was for her insurance, he confessed, red-faced. I didn't know it said you were mismanaging your medications. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Quaid. I touched his hand. Then you'll put it in writing. The truth this time. And he did. Still, the betrayal stung. Lena was weaving lies with the same finesse she used to weave her hair into perfect curls. She'd even found a doctor, Dr. Lehman, who claimed my refusal of a psychiatric evaluation was itself proof of decline. When Weber told me this, my laugh was so sharp it startled even me. So if I resist their trap, it proves I'm insane? Exactly, he said grimly. That's the game. We had no choice but to play ours. He arranged for me to meet Dr. Moore, an independent psychiatrist with no ties to Max or Lena. The evaluation was grueling. 2 hours of memory tests, logic puzzles, financial reasoning exercises, but at the end, Dr. Moore smiled kindly. Mrs. Quaid, your cognitive results are excellent, above average for your age. You're not just competent, you're sharp. I'll testify to that. Her words were a balm. For once, the truth was on record. Meanwhile, Eleanor rallied her friends. One by one, they came to my house, armed with stories, ready to stand with me. Maria, who'd watched me host book club with perfect clarity. Carmen, who'd driven me to the farmer's market where I handled every purchase. Cynthia, my stylist, who declared I was more lucid than most 40-year-olds she knew. And Alfreda, 80 and wise, who told me bluntly, they'll twist your kindness into madness if you let them. Don't. Their support built something inside me I hadn't felt in years. An army. Not of soldiers, but of truth-tellers. One evening, after the garden club left, I sat with Eleanor in the kitchen, sipping tea. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock. You know what hurts the most, I confessed. Not losing the money, not even the humiliation. It's realizing that my love was never real to them. It was only as good as the checks I wrote. Eleanor reached across the table, her grip steady. That's not your shame, Marisela. That's theirs. And soon, everyone will see it. But her words couldn't erase the grief that welled in me. That night, alone in bed, I finally let myself cry. Not the sharp, angry tears I'd shed before, but the deep, guttural sobs of mourning. I was saying goodbye to a son who was still alive, yet more gone than my husband, who lay in the grave. When the tears dried, something harder remained. If they wanted to drag me into a courtroom, I would not arrive as a victim. I would walk in with every receipt, every testimony, every ounce of dignity they'd tried to strip from me. For years, I had been their provider, their safety net, their silent servant. Now, I would become their reckoning. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and nerves. I arrived early, dressed in a black suit that had hung untouched in my closet since my husband's funeral. This time, it wasn't grief clothing, it was armor. My hair was neatly brushed, my face bare of anything but determination. Mr. Weber met me on the courthouse steps. Remember, he said quietly, they carry the burden of proof. All we have to do is show you are capable, rational, and independent. Let them show their greed. It will reveal itself. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, yet it carried the weight of centuries. The judge, Miller, sat with an impassive face, his gavel resting like a sleeping weapon. When Max walked in, he wore a new suit, still stiff from the shop. Lena entered beside him in a black dress, as if mourning the death of her own conscience. She avoided my eyes, but I could feel her smile sharpen from across the room. Their lawyer, a tall, silver-haired man with a voice like smooth gravel, began, Your Honor, today we present a petition not out of malice, but out of love. My clients, Max and Lena Quaid, have watched their mother spiral into paranoia, isolating herself from her family, cutting off vital financial routines, and falling prey to manipulative strangers. They seek guardianship only to ensure her well-being. The words slid across the room like oil, designed to make me sound fragile, pitiable, confused. Then came the witnesses. First, Lena herself. She took the stand, tears already poised. Marisela has always been like a second mother to me, she said, voice trembling. But in the last few months, she's changed. She won't answer our calls. She accuses us of using her. She's hostile. She dabbed her eyes delicately. It breaks my heart. Weber rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Quaid, he said, voice crisp, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money? She blinked, faltered. We we always talked about many things. Give us one date. I don't remember exact dates. He paced slowly. Is it true that you and your husband married without inviting her? Lena shifted, her voice small. It was a small ceremony. Did you or did you not tell her she wasn't invited because you only wanted special people present? Her face flushed crimson. Those words were taken out of context. What context, Weber asked sharply, justifies telling a mother she is not special enough to attend her only son's wedding? The silence that followed was louder than any answer. Next came Max. Seeing him swear to tell the truth while preparing to lie felt like a blade in my chest. He sat tall, his voice steady. My mom has always been generous, but lately, she's erratic, cutting us off financially without warning, accusing us of manipulation. She refuses to let us help. Weber's turn. Mr. Quaid, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? Max shifted. I don't know the exact amount. Would $33,400 sound correct? His jaw tightened. Maybe. She was always generous. How many times did you visit her without asking for money? The pause was brutal. His eyes flicked toward Lena, then away. I don't recall. Is it true you entered her home without permission, accompanied by a lawyer? Max's face darkened. We were worried about her. And during that visit, did you or did you not present documents for her to sign, granting you power of attorney over her finances? He clenched his fists. We just wanted to help. The courtroom stirred with quiet murmurs. The cracks in their story were visible now, spreading like fractures in glass. Then came Mr. Davis, my bitter neighbor. He testified that I had installed cameras, yelled in the street, kept suspicious company. Weber calmly asked, Have you ever spoken directly to my client? No. So your testimony is based entirely on what you observed from across the street? Yes. Would you say installing security systems after a break-in threat is irrational? Davis scowled. Paranoid, maybe. And defending one's home from uninvited visitors, would you call that irrational? Davis fumbled, finally muttering, I guess not. Their star witness, Dr. Lehman, claimed my refusal of psychiatric evaluation showed decline. But when Weber presented Dr. Moore's comprehensive report of my above-average cognitive results, Lehman's credibility withered. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green, my pharmacist, explained how Lena misled him into signing a document that distorted my medical history. Cynthia, my stylist, testified that I was lucid, independent, more vibrant than ever. Maria and Carmen described evenings with me, my memory sharp, my reasoning intact. Alfreda, with her 80 years of gravity, told the court, Marisela is clearer than women half her age. Her only mistake was being too generous. Finally, I took the stand. My hands trembled slightly as I swore in, but my voice, when it came, was steady. Weber guided me gently. I told the whole story, the wedding I wasn't invited to, the thousands siphoned from me, the sofa I bought where I sat unwelcome, the phrase special people that sliced through me like ice water. Why did you stop supporting them? Weber asked finally. I lifted my chin. Because I finally understood that what I was giving them was not love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome. I was not. Do you regret your decision? I regret only that it took me so long to make it. The opposing lawyer tried to rattle me, asking rapid-fire questions about dates, bills, medications. I answered each calmly, my memory crisp. The more he pressed, the clearer I sounded. When the testimonies ended, their lawyer gave his closing. This is not malice, Your Honor, but concern. An elderly woman manipulated into alienation, a family desperate to protect her. Weber stood, voice cutting like a scalpel. What we've seen today is not concern. It is greed wrapped in crocodile tears. They excluded her from a wedding she paid for. They entered her home with a lawyer, demanding power of attorney. They fabricated witnesses. They fabricated evidence. The only thing in decline here is their integrity. My client is competent, independent, and deserving of respect, not guardianship. Judge Miller disappeared into chambers. 2 hours crawled by like years. When he returned, the room hushed. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, he began, It is the judgment of this court that Mrs. Marisela Quaid is fully competent. Psychiatric evaluation confirms her mental faculties are intact. Her financial decisions, though unwelcome to her family, are rational and well within her rights. This petition for guardianship is denied in full. The gavel struck, and in that sound I heard chains breaking. Across the aisle, Max's face drained of color. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line of fury. Their lawyer gathered papers briskly, already calculating his fee. I rose slowly, the weight of 71 years balanced in my spine, and walked out of that courtroom with my head high. When I stepped out of the courthouse that afternoon, the sky was an impossible blue, the kind of blue you never notice until something heavy has been lifted off your chest. The air smelled sharp with autumn, crisp leaves swirling across the marble steps. For the first time in years, I felt taller, not because I had grown, but because I was no longer bent under the weight of obligation. Max and Lena trailed behind with their lawyer, their heads close, their voices hushed and angry. I didn't slow my stride to hear them. I didn't need to. Whatever they said could no longer touch me. Weber touched my elbow gently. "You won today, Marisela. Not just the case. Yourself." I nodded, unable to speak, because tears pressed hot at the back of my eyes. Not of grief, but of fierce, unyielding relief. That evening, Eleanor insisted on a celebration. She brought her friends, the women who had become my unexpected army. They filled my kitchen with laughter and casseroles, poured wine into my old mismatched glasses, and toasted not just to justice, but to survival. "To freedom," Maria declared. "To dignity," Carmen added. Alfreda, with her 80-year-old certainty, raised her glass last, to the woman who remembered her own worth. Their voices rose together, clinking crystal and glass, and for the first time in so long, I didn't feel like the odd one out in a family photo. I had a family again, chosen, not imposed. That night, when the last dish was washed and the house fell quiet, I sat alone in the living room. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was sacred, a silence I had earned. Weeks passed. I sold my house, not out of defeat, but as a declaration. The walls that had once witnessed my humiliation deserved to rest. With Weber's help, I found a bright apartment near the city center. It had tall windows that drank in the morning sun, a balcony where I could drink coffee without fearing who might pull into my driveway. I donated half my money to charities that protect elders from financial abuse. It felt right, turning my pain into someone else's shield. With the other half, I began to live. I traveled. I stood in front of Van Gogh's Starry Night in Amsterdam and felt the swirl of paint echo in my own chest. I rode a gondola in Venice, the water lapping like a heartbeat against the boat. I walked cobblestone streets in Paris with no one hurrying me, no one waiting for me to pull out my wallet. In between journeys, I painted again. Flowers, skies, portraits of faces from memory. My brush moved with a freedom my hands hadn't known in decades. News of Max and Lena reached me only in fragments, through Diana, through neighbors. They had moved into a smaller apartment. Lena had taken her first real job in years. Max was restless, angry, always chasing money that slipped away. Perhaps life was finally forcing them to learn what I had been paying them to avoid: responsibility. One evening, I visited Robert's grave, the husband I'd lost decades earlier. I sat in the cool grass, brushing away leaves. "My love," I whispered. "I finally stopped confusing sacrifice with love. I thought I was honoring you by taking care of Max at any cost, but all I did was bury myself, no more." The breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of earth and memory. For the first time, I didn't ask Robert for strength. I told him I had found it. Months later, I stood on my balcony at sunset. The city hummed below, alive but distant. A glass of wine rested in my hand. The horizon was lit with gold. I thought of the woman I had been a year ago, sitting at a kitchen table, trembling at every phone call, believing that love could be bought with rent checks and grocery bags. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who had walked through betrayal, through humiliation, through the threat of legal erasure, and come out whole. I whispered into the fading light, as if sealing a promise with the world itself. True love never has a price, and the most important person I must love and protect is myself. The sky deepened, stars beginning to pierce through, and for the first time in my 72 years, I felt not just alive, but free.